Hello! If this is your first time, my name is Ella. Welcome back to another installment of Ella Actually Teaches English. It's been a while since I've done a video like this, just chronicling what I've used, what methods I've used, and what methods I've tweaked, and what methods I don't really like that haven't worked out the best for me. I want to just shed light on my journey because it's been almost a decade. Well, actually a little more than a decade since I've started learning English. Before I start today's video, I'd just like to introduce myself. Hi, my name is Ella. I'm a full-time English teacher that offers private one-on-one classes as well as online courses for you to study on your own. I've also written an ebook/self-study guide. So if you're studying English as a beginner from scratch, I've got you covered. And of course, I make videos here as well as other platforms, so you'll find me anywhere. Just a little shameless plug. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Tip number 1 is I watch TVs and movies with subtitles. Because watching TV without English subtitles is like eating food without the nutrients. You're still getting something, but you're not getting to the core essence of watching TV. For the first 6 months, treat every single audio material or video material as you would a written material. So treat every TV episode as an article or a book, right? Actually print out their screenplay, if you will. For TV shows like Friends and Modern Families, you can actually find scripts of just their dialogues and you can read them ahead of time. That way, even if you want to go into it blindly, you have a better idea of like what words are being spoken. Basically, tip 2 is in service of tip 1. Sure, you're watching stuff with subtitles, but it's no use if you're watching, say, something that is out of your vocab range, right? So when I started, I was watching stuff within the very common 3,000 words that native speakers use on a daily basis, words that are common in spoken English and written English. And so anything that's beyond that range, and by the way, you can check it in a dictionary, in a proper dictionary. If it's out of that range, I don't mess with that material. And so in the beginning, I would avoid, say, documentaries or fictions, if it were reading materials. They're no use to me because I'm still struggling with the most common range of vocab. And this is where it can get kind of confusing. A lot of people think that they have more than 3,000 words when they actually don't, because knowing a word, knowing the translation, the Chinese translation of a word is different from mastering a word. Words like go, get, hang, that supposedly are very easy because they're only like one syllable, typically like 4 to 5 letters. There aren't that many letters in a word. But these words are the most tricky because they have so many different definitions, so many different ways to use it. Like certain words like go have like 50 different phrasal verbs, and then sometimes one phrasal verb can have 10 different meanings. For instance, go off has like 4 or 5 different meanings. Actually, I have to double check, but don't quote me on that. My point being, just because you know go to school, go shopping, doesn't actually know you've mastered the word go. Like building a house, laying down all the bricks, you might have all these bricks. Your house might look very tall, but a lot of the bricks that you have might be hollow and very flimsy, and so your house might very much just fall because your foundation is not strong. You have to really dig deep into the words that are supposedly easy, especially verbs, adjectives, adverbs, those kind of stuff. Okay, tip number 3 is use a monolingual dictionary. This is particularly important for abstract words that I mentioned, words that you can't touch, feel, or easily translate into your native language. So I could translate light into Chinese, right? Light means 灯光. I can even put a picture underneath the word light. I could put a picture of light underneath the word light. So it's easily translatable. Those are concrete, real-life words. They're so much easier. They don't necessarily require monolingual dictionaries, but words like go, go off, go away, go on, get, hang. I still remember the first time I was learning the word hang. It didn't make sense to me because in school, in like English textbooks, you get a vocab list. It's very straightforward. Hang means 悬挂, right? But in colloquial English, there's so many ways that you can use the word hang. Without a monolingual dictionary, it doesn't really matter how much you've read, how much time you spend on English. It can still feel like there's a gap between what you want to say and what actually comes out of your mouth because you've never actually learned how to use the word properly, specifically abstract words. And some like English Chinese dictionaries help, but most of the time people just use like Google Translate or Youdao Translate or very simple like one-word translation dictionaries. And in times of need, like when you're just trying to get through a document and sign a document and send it away, sure, a translation app is better than a no app. But when you're learning English, when you're trying to replicate how a sentence is formed, you can't just rely on a 翻译软件, right? You need to use a very comprehensive dictionary because eventually you're going to have to think abstract thoughts. You're going to have to think in English because that's the only way that you can form a sentence fast and form a sentence accurately, I might add, as opposed to if you learned every single word in Chinese, of course, you're going to think in Chinese. Tip number 4 is to write down or look up what you've heard and read immediately. This comes in handy even for me now. Yesterday, I went out with a friend and she said something along the lines of stuck the landing. This friend of mine, she uses a lot of idiom slang that you don't necessarily learn from textbooks. And even certain native speakers don't use idioms all that much. But this one friend of mine uses them a lot. And every time she uses one, I'm just like, yes, another one. But it will slip my mind if I don't slow it down, repeat it to myself in my head, or write it down, or look it up. Sometimes you have to look it up because it's so abstract. But most of the time, you can tell by the context if you actually live in that environment. But yeah, speed and reaction matters, particularly when it comes to learning a word in a context. That's the easiest way to learn a new expression or a new word. But if you don't react right away, if you don't write it down somewhere and look it up, you will miss it. So for instance, the same friend that said stuck the landing to me yesterday was kind of struggling with the expression dress to the nines. Like, neither of us were sure if it was dress to the nines or dress to the tens. And so I actually took that opportunity to look it up on Google. And now I know for sure it's dress to the nines. Let's move on to tip number 5. Keep a vocab journal because you have to look up stuff. You need a place where you can keep what words you've looked up. This is kind of my superpower. This is my only superpower when it comes to learning English is that I'm very good at taking notes. I'm very fast at taking notes. I can write really fast. I've taken so many vocab notes that my handwriting, my penmanship has gotten better. These are empty because I just got lazy, but I have digital notes also on my computer. The reason I say that it's my only superpower is that at some point, learning English or any foreign language is just about numbers. It's just about how many words you interact with, how many words you pay attention to, how many words that you know with certainty how to use. And some people can repeat the word to themselves and keep everything inside in their mind palace. I like to write everything out. Okay, I write things down even when I'm trying to process my emotions because I can physically see what's going on here. Another, I guess, advantage when it comes to writing down notes is that when you write, you can see how the sentence is formed. And so even when you're copying a sentence from a dictionary or from a book, it's like you're writing that sentence because you have to think about how it's formed. And so in a way, it's helping you with output. It's helping you learn how to speak and write better. If you're just reading without noting anything down, you will understand a lot, but the way you speak, the way you write is going to stay the same. I also have this habit of grouping words into categories or grouping expressions into categories. This is not a daily basis. Like I do this every month. Like I will go over all the words that I found to be kind of new and confusing and kind of try to group them into the same meanings or same scenarios or idioms that have numbers in it. I'll group them. That way I can review what I've learned. I can match what I just learned with what I already knew. I didn't know dress to the nines, but I knew at the 11th hour. And so when I put them two together, I get to refresh my memories on the old expressions, my old knowledge, and also strengthen my new memory, my new knowledge. I don't use rote memory to memorize words. In contrast, I spend a lot of energy studying words. I am very particular. I'm very meticulous with my vocab. And then tip number 6 is record yourself speak. And tip number 7 is go to karaoke. I sort of like these two tips together because they're both focused on pronunciation. Luckily for myself, I didn't really struggle with the pronunciation side of things. And I don't know why. It's just like it came really natural to me, probably because I started really taking pronunciation seriously when I was young. It wasn't really my choice. My dad forced me to. But I did enjoy going to karaoke. Back around 2010, there was so many pop songs, so many catchy songs, so many easy songs for us English beginners to learn. Like Adele, Justin Bieber came out around that time. Like Baby. Baby was such a jam for me, okay? I didn't really care for him, even as a 14-year-old. I was like, you're not all that, okay? But I like your songs because it's so easy for me to learn. And the thing with music is that it forces you to practice your linking pattern, right? If you don't link your words together, you might miss that beat. You won't stay on beat. As opposed to if you were just like mimicking someone's speech, you're doing shadow practice. It doesn't really have that pressure. Yeah, either go to a karaoke bar or download one of those karaoke apps on your phone. Actually, when I started, there weren't any apps. Like smartphones were a new thing. So I would physically go to a karaoke and just sing my heart out. And ironically, my voice, like I've also gotten better at singing along with my pronunciation, my English pronunciation. It's like killing two birds in one stone. Yeah, and then record yourself speak. That's also important, particularly for people that are just starting out with pronunciation or they've been taught bad pronunciation by their teachers or by their surroundings. It's really important to hear yourself speak because a lot of times people practice by just speaking into the air or speaking with the teacher, but they themselves can't hear their pronunciation. I really had to do this when I was learning French. The vowels in French are very similar to one another. And when I was just practicing into the air, like speaking into the air, I really couldn't hear a difference. But when I record myself, I could hear a difference. That being said, I might not be able to correct my pronunciation right away, but it's still good to hear the difference between your pronunciation and the original version, like the native speaker's version. If you can hear the difference, if you can hear your mistake, you're already one step closer. Okay, tip number 8 and number 9, I also like to group together. Number 8 is focus on quality input and comprehension. And number 9 is practice slow and controlled output. So let me just put input and output into simple man's term. Input is basically listening and reading. You're not really composing your own thoughts. You're not speaking. You're not coming up with stuff to say. You're just understanding what other people have, okay? Be it a written material or someone's actually speaking to you. So a lot of times when people start learning a language, they're very result-driven. They want to go to a foreign country. They want to go traveling. They want to start particularly speaking right away. It's so counterintuitive. Most people don't want to focus on reading and understanding and listening because they think, oh, that's going to take away my power in speaking. That's going to take away my time that I could have spent on practicing speaking with a native speaker. But actually, if you spend all of your time just doing like dialogues with a native speaker or learning phrases from a conversational textbook, all you're doing is becoming a trained actor. All you're doing is practicing monologues even. You're not really in control of what's going to be said to you. Let's say, for instance, you pick up a book called 旅游英语100句, 美国旅游100句, right? And you actually memorize all of those sentences, all those dialogues. You're going to speak to a native speaker and they're going to leave with the impression that, oh, you actually understand more English than you currently do. And so they're going to speak to you more words. They're going to respond with more complex sentences that you haven't, to be honest, fully nailed down. That has happened to me before. When I was probably like 10 or 11 years old, I would run into foreigners on the street in China. And I was very naive, very enthusiastic to speak to native speakers. So I would just be like, hi, how are you? Where are you from? And they'll just come at me with more English that I could not understand. And so likewise, a lot of people have that starter pack. They know how to open a conversation, but because they haven't nailed down their input skills, they haven't read enough, they haven't known enough words and known them enough, it doesn't really matter how they can speak, how much they can speak, because comprehension is still your weakest point. And so rather than diving headfirst into, oh, I want to speak right away, I want to practice dialogues right away, why not just focus on input, commit to learning input, commit to understanding other people first, and then gradually practice slow and controlled output. Let me break it down, okay? Basically, you don't want to speak right away. You don't want to converse right away, because to talk to people, it's a two-way street, right? Not only are you speaking, but this other person is also speaking to you. And so you're doing two things at once. You're composing thoughts. At the same time, you're also comprehending, you're decoding what they're saying to you. And that's too much going on. There's too much going on for beginners. So you just focus on one thing, okay? Output, just output, and slow and controlled. So what does slow and controlled output mean? Writing, okay? When you write, you can think about how a sentence is formed. You can correct your mistakes. You can look at what you've written so far. You can think about this word and then change it up and then look up this word, see if it's actually correct. Or you can do a video recording. You can do an audio recording. You can basically create this dialogue with yourself or a monologue like I'm doing right now. And when you have a recording or a record of things, there's room for improvement as opposed to you're just talking to the air or talking to a native speaker. Most of the time, they don't feel the need to correct you because, I don't know, they feel rude to do that, especially if they're not an English teacher. But you can do that to yourself. You can be a lot more brutal and honest with yourself, with the tools, with the resources that you have online, be it a dictionary or a teacher like me or a reference book. Yada, yada, yada. Focus on input and then gradually evolve into output. And then number 10 is learn etymology. This one I left until the last tip because remember how in tip 2, we're focusing on range, focus on the first 3,000 words first. So in that range, there aren't that many words that require you to learn etymology because they're usually pretty short. They don't really have roots or prefixes. It's not until you learn words that are out of that 3,000 range, when you're learning, say, psychology or mechanical engineering, when you're learning complex words that even native speakers don't know. Like not all of them know. When you want to get to that like GRE vocab level, that's when you learn etymology, 学词根词缀，就有点像是中文的偏旁部首, right? You can find common patterns, common denominators between seemingly unrelated words. That's why I left it to the last. It's not really essential in the beginner stage, but it definitely can come in handy when you're dealing with complex terminologies and jargons and whatnot. So let me know if I missed out on anything. Let me know what tip that I mentioned that really sparked your curiosity, that really changed your mind. Let me know what has been true to you, what hasn't been true to you. I want to know. All right. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you in the next one.